Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jaguars for OnSI every single day since August 2019, and we're continuing to move forward through yet another season together. As always, you can find our 100% free 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us on social media such as Facebook or Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. As we have done for our weekend episode each week during the previous season, we are giving you our final score prediction for the Jaguars versus Cincinnati Bengals. Now, in saying that, you're going to hang around with me for a little bit. I have been looking at this game through a few different angles throughout the week. I've talked to players in the locker room to just get their general energy, their general, thoughts, how they view the Bengals. And I can say this certainly seems like a locker room and a coaching staff that got a lot of confidence from last week's game, but also one that thinks they can be a lot better in last week's game. There wasn't any player I talked to offensively this week who was like, yeah, the job is finished. Like, the Jaguars have arrived as an offense. That was far from the case. Actually, I thought one of the best quotes a player gave me this week was running back Travis Etienne. I asked him, Liam Cohen talked all offseason about the running game, about making the running game come in alive. Doing it in week one, does that just kind of vindicate his vision, etc.? And, not word for word, but he more or less said, you can't just do it in week one. They got to do it the next week versus Cincinnati. Then they got to do it a week after that, and so on and so forth. So I got the general vibe and impression that this was a locker room that wasn't set to rest on its laurels. And that wasn't just accepting a week one win against a bad Carolina Panthers team. But it takes more than mindset to win an NFL game. This is, in my opinion, a stars league. I mean, you've seen the Green Bay Packers go from a pretty good team to one of the best teams in the NFL. Trading for Michael Parsons. You see stars really tip the scales one way or another in pretty much every single NFL game. The blue chips, the X factors, whatever you want to call them. And to me, this is a question of which stars get the upper edge. Which blue chips can outdo their counterparts. And there's, three different really phases to look at. One, quarterback, Joe Burrow versus Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, Joe Burrow has done more in his NFL career. He's more accomplished, more productive, more highly regarded than Trevor Lawrence, who went number one a year after Burrow did. The two have been connected a lot since their college careers. Trevor is 0-1 against Burrow, that 2021 game, where he actually played pretty well. I was telling somebody on the Jags practice field, they asked, was the last time the Jags visited since he was at the Urban game? And I said, yes, it was. But the Jaguars, when they took on the Bengals in that game, Trevor, that was one of his best games, in his rookie season. Pretty easily find it. I think that obviously, Joe Burrow has taken his career to a different place than Trevor. I think that, the fact that he's been to a Super Bowl and he's had more team success, I think is one thing. But in that game, Trevor was 17 for 24 for 204 yards, a solid, outing. Really was relatively mistake-free, but Joe Burrow was 25 of 32 for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Boyd had 118 yards catching. It was a tough day for the Jaguars on and off the field that weekend. But it's a different team now. That was many years ago. I mean, leading receiver and leading rusher for the Jags are James Robinson and Laviska Shenault. I mean, we are an eternity removed from those days. But the quarterback battle, which quarterback, is more efficient, which makes less mistakes, which handles adversity better, that will answer the question. And I'm not, saying that Trevor Lawrence is next to Joe Burrow in any quarterback rankings or anything like that, but that is obviously the matchup, even though they don't play each other, that will determine the game. Which quarterback has the upper hand? Next one is which number one receiver has a better game, Jamar Chase or Brian Thomas? I tell you, Jamar Chase, in my opinion, that's tough between him and Jefferson. I think Jamar Chase is the best receiver in the NFL, and I've been a Justin Jefferson guy for a long time. The reason I say Chase is just that he is such a physical freak and bully and specimen. I think he's like the freakiest, receiver, athleticism-wise, in the NFL. And then you have Brian Thomas Jr. on the other end, another fellow LSU Tiger. Started real slow in training camp and never really picked up until the very end of it in joint practices against the Dolphins. And then on Sunday had one of the worst games of his career. I don't think that can be disputed. And I don't even think it was like one of the worst games like he played badly. I'm not saying it like that. I'm saying one of the worst games from a production standpoint. I mean, he had one catch for 11 yards and 7 targets. And I know he had a rushing touchdown. I know. I get it. But he's the guy the passing game has to funnel through, even though I do believe that they are going to spread the ball around a good bit this year. Travis Hunter, De'Ami Brown, Brendan Strange, the backfield. I believe it was either 5 or 6 of the last games of the 2024 season, BTJ saw 10-plus targets. I'm not sure, just with the style of the Liam Cohen offense, will he see 10-plus targets in 5 to 6 games all year this year? I think it's a question worth asking. And I think for the Jaguars to have a chance, they need him and Lawrence to simply have a better connection than they had in week 1. Because if this game becomes a shootout, this game becomes big on big, the Jaguars will need Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. to be able to deliver and do whatever their version is of keeping pace with Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. And then finally, the pass rushers. Trey Hendrickson, Josh Hines-Allen. 2 of the best pass rushers in the entire NFL. 2 legit double-digit sack guys. 2 really guys who can take over a game completely. Both had completely dominant week 1 performances. I like the Jaguars' scheme in left tackle more than I like the Bengals scheme in left tackle in terms of protection. I think you'll see a healthy dose of, LaQuint Allen helping out on the left side. Maybe some tight end chips, stuff like that. Stuff they didn't really have to do the week before. But if Hines-Allen can get consistent pressure, like Myles Garrett and the Browns did, if he can force Joe Burrow into some mistakes, those are the plays that could determine the game. So, I think the Jaguars match up well with the Bengals on paper. I think they have a front that can get after them. I think the Jaguars, offensive line and their weapons, are matched up well for this Bengals defense. Bengals defense probably stops the run better than they stop the pass, but they're not very good defending the slot receivers or defending in space in general. So I do think that there are some very positive things trending in the Jaguars' direction. I'm going to go Jaguars 27, Bengals 23. I think the Jaguars win a close one. I think that the Jaguars, just their defense, their scheme, the pressure working in, marriage with the coverage, I think will force at least 2 Joe Burrow turnovers that will help decide this game. So those are my thoughts of Sunday's game. Please give me a line on what you think. Am I wrong? Am I right? Whatever you want to say. And you can make sure that you find us at the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast.